Ah, tea time.
Welcome everybody! Souldin of the Grin Brothers here, and it's time for another episode of Tea Time. I'm almost through my 24 days of tea Christmas calendar. I've got this tea and one more for Christmas Eve to go. Luckily I've not got work on either today or Christmas Eve, so woo! In fact, I actually got pretty good work hours, so I didn't even get Boxing Day, so woo! Doing really good for avoiding all the sort of harsher days. In any case, for today's tea, I have mango fruit tea. It's a fruit tea, as the name kind of implies. Brand is Darville's of Windsor, and brew time is 5 minutes, which I have done for this tea. I couldn't find any other recommendations for brew time, just 5 minutes. A deliciously sweet tea with a lush, natural flavour thanks to its load full of mango. Popular in Germany and Austria, it is a refreshing tea with a citrus aroma. And I had heard, I couldn't confirm it because it was very hard to tell the difference between the iced tea variant or the mango with other stuff variant. They're supposed to have a deep red colour, and, well, it's more of a black colour, but there's a hint of red to it. It's such a dark red that it looks black. You know what you get, sort of thing. I guess kind of like blood. That's not a very appealing way to make the mango sound, but... Or, let's see, what was that line? Mango! Something like that. Was the line from, which game was it? Dota or LOL? Rafi likes to say it like that, so... Oh, bad time to have to clear my throat, but... In any case, for today's tea time, well, just to be safe, I'm going to throw up the age warning picture right now, just to be safe. And that's kind of convenient because, with YouTube's current policies, provided I'm actually uploading this on YouTube at this point, I mean, who knows? The potential plan is that it could be going on to Valere.tv as a new channel, but, who knows? Maybe we'll be uploading both, It's all up in the air at the moment. YouTube's current policies are very confusing. But put the age warning there just to be safe, because today's subject definitely enters into a more mature territory. And I say mature, but really it kind of comes across the opposite of mature when you get down to the subject. But it warrants an 18-rated subject. 18 just in case, because today's tea time is how to sexy. Which isn't a case of me teaching people how to be sexy, because I have none of that. I have no sex appeal. I put off everyone. I am completely unattractive and all that. But rather, it's, of course, a video game related topic with sexiness as kind of the aspect to it. The title came to me as because of the theme rather than specifically how to be sexy. Because this tea time was inspired by a video by Stop Skeletons from Fame. He did a retrospective on the Parasite Eve series, and I'm not playing Parasite Eve, but I ended up clicking on that video for some reason. Can't remember the exact reasons why. And he got to the part about third birthday, and the third entry in the Parasite Eve series, and he criticised the, as he put it, the male gaze aspect and basically the ecchi elements of the game, the eroticism it has. And that got me thinking about, well, sex appeal in video games. How do you incorporate, how should ecchi elements be incorporated in video games? Should they at all? And I kind of just thought of that because of it. I mean, of course, it's a subject that I often end up encountering, at least the subject of sex appeal in video games or etchiness in video games, because, of course, I like the Dead or Alive series, and funny enough, that has kind of been rather prolific with its association with jiggle physics. It is rather well-versed in the erotic ways, as it were. Though, to be fair, none of the games I've played really stretch up into the erotic terms where they have to become, completely barred, mature. They don't go into the sort of visual novel hentai terms sort of thing. But there are ecchi elements in quite a few of the games I played. I previously mentioned Galgun 2, and got a really cool tea time on that, but that has Welcome to Pantsu Paradise on the back cover of it, So yeah, I kind of just wanted to talk about ecchi elements within video games and really how I feel they should be implemented. What mechanics and features implement them best, and where do they not get implemented very well? For instance, when I was hearing his complaints about how the character was presented and such, a lot of the ecchi aspects of the character presented, I had little issue with. I mean, again, I haven't played the series myself, so I wouldn't know how the character should be best presented. The personality stuff did seem a bit troubling, although someone mentioned that there's actually plot reasons for this. It's actually a different character to what we were previously known due to some sort of body swap shenanigans going on. But in any case, it was the personality stuff kind of veered into a Metroid Other M territory of this kind of poorly presents the character's character, which I can understand is not something you should really try to do in terms of trying to do an ecchi element. You shouldn't try to say make a character who's usually more dominant, submissive, purely for the sake of fan service, as it were, or rather, I guess it's less appealing to fans, or more just purely for the sake of eroticism. But stuff like, where the camera was panned and such, and the costume break mechanic, or armor break as we tend to know, wherein the character gets their clothes damaged from battle and you actually have to buy to replace him sort of thing, those I didn't have much of an issue with. The camera panning, I mean, again, okay, I guess to explain, this is coming from a heterosexual male's viewpoint of it. The male gaze stuff didn't really seem, as he put it, the camera angles and such didn't really seem too big of an issue. I mean, heck, in a couple of screens, the butt shot, as it were blurred. And to be fair, most of the time it was more of a full body shot. Yeah, sure, it clearly was centered at a slightly lower angle. They're trying to get a good position. But they were honestly, most of the time, in a lot of the screenshots he was at least showing, and the footage he was showing, trying to actually get a full full body sort of image of the protagonist. I don't think there's too much of a problem. And even then, a camera positioning, provided it's in like a cutscene or something, isn't too big of a problem. I mean, I guess if it's in the middle of something serious, it can be kind of distracting, or rather tone deaf, as it were. But in general, just, the camera panning to eventually move to another scene to bear its present things, I don't think there's much of an issue with that. I don't think it takes away too much unless it obviously becomes too distracting and, again, too tone deaf for the scene in particular. But I don't think, our camera angle, a funny meme I actually do enjoy is the anime camera angles meme, where they sort of comment on, do you find anime camera angles strange? What do you mean? It's like pan to like the sort of butt angle shots as it were. But, I don't find too much of an issue with it depending on the scene it takes place, and depending on how long it lingers. It should obviously start to pan away if it's trying to do an establishing shot. And, obviously in a more serious scene, it shouldn't linger, or you shouldn't really be focusing on that per se. But that I didn't have too much of a problem with. And, of course, in the costume idea, the way, the clothes get damaged, honestly, I actually really liked that. I really liked having a visual representation of health and endurability through the factors such as clothes being damaged. Soul Calibur, for instance, the armor break, really like that sort of feature. I like it when games are able to visually show you without it being too distracting, as it were. I think it's actually a pretty cool touch having it so that your character's clothes, have sort of clothing damage and armor break sort of stuff. I actually really like that, and I think it's a good way to have a visual representation of health, for instance. In fact, I'd say it's actually a better way than how, you get FPS games. A visual representation I kind of find annoying is when they have the whole, your screen grows red sort of thing and a lack of a health bar. I hate that. I always prefer health bars. But in terms of an alternative to that, rather than have, say, the screen colour is slightly different or like really annoying ones where if you're really low on health, suddenly it goes black and white, or you can hear the heartbeat. The heartbeat's just really irritating because you get rid of all the cool sound design. Out of all those, if it's not health bar, then my preference would be armor breakage to show health, and then to also visually show you healing health, the clothes repairing, for instance. And it's also a good way to just kind of showcase your adventure. I kind of, again, using the example I was given, I kind of like the idea of, having to buy to repair your clothes. It kind of show you could actually stick with the same clothes for as long as you could until they're almost entirely damaged, just to showcase how troubling how the trials you faced, how tough the experience has been to get to that point. And again, I think that's actually a really cool way, and it doesn't get in the way too much. In fact, in terms of some of the serious games, more of the serious action sort of games sort of things, again, like I said, it shows the trials the characters have been through. So I actually think the armor breaking is one of the best ways to have a erotic element, because it actually ends up adding a lot to a lot of the scenes. The times that it becomes problematic is, well, this is going to be funny. In terms of if I was to say the best games implementing the ecchi elements, I'd say stuff like Dead or Alive's done a pretty good job for reasons I'll explain later, and Soul Calibur has probably done the best of them all. But a game which does ecchi elements but does it kind of poorly in terms of its implementation, I'd actually say the Stellar and Kagura series is actually really poor in terms of its ecchi implementation. And one of those is in regards to the armor break. When in the armor break of both the mainline Sakura games as well as Peach Peach Splash, which I do actually have playtime experience with. It's a great playthrough of that game, by the way, and honestly the game's actually lots of fun, so check that out, link in the summary below. The armor breaks in that pans away. It's like a small cutscene starts playing to showcase the armor breaking. In the case of Peach Beach Splash, it's usually like the bikini sort of being knocked off sort of thing. That's a poor way of doing it, because that's taking away from the game. Now, there is a way you can do an armor breaking cutscene well within the middle of the game, but in terms of games like that, it cuts away from the gameplay. You're taken out of the game. That sort of brief pause is annoying, and I think that's actually a really poor way to do it. Whereas, I guess a way to do that sort of cutscene thing well is, say if in a fighting game, we'll use, say, Marvel vs. Capcom as an example, even though it doesn't have the armor breaking mechanic, but okay, Soul Calibur has the armor breaking mechanic, although I feel I'm going to overuse it. But basically, whenever you use an ultimate, the game naturally pauses, and when you hit with the ultimate, it then does a cinematic. These are things we get used to. But however, these are one-on-one fighting games, typically, which do this sort of thing, which means it's kind of okay, because whilst you're taken away out of the scene, you're always still going to be in an advantageous position. You're going to have to worry about someone who may have been attacking you, or where recover your bearings and such, because you'll be in the advantageous position and the enemy would be knocked down to the floor or something, or still sort of knocked up into the air. So when you recover your bearings, you're in a good position. And that's where, if, say, one of the games wanted to, if they had an armor break mechanic, that would be a good place to put an armor break cutscene in, because you're already in a sort of transitioning cutscene anyway. The gameplay flow has already been interrupted, but once it's sort of uninterrupted, as it were, it's not going to be a problem. Whereas in games like Senran Kagura, you could end up being shot at because you were interrupted by the cutscene, you've taken out of the cutscene, and you have to quickly have a couple seconds to quickly go, okay, where was that enemy? Oh no, they've started to move, sort of thing. Even if it isn't real time, it's sort of playing, even if they get paused during that cutscene, obviously, it's still a case of you've, lost sight of them for that brief second to focus on this other scene. And that's when the sexual mechanics, the ecchi mechanics, become interruptive of the gameplay, disruptive. I'm not sure. I'm thinking of certain words, and then I think of the proper word I want to use just after using the makeup word, as it were. Other ecchi elements that kind of work well, Dead or Alive showcased a lot of them. Jiggle physics. Jiggle physics in general is a really good way. I mean, particularly more so in terms of the female characters. There's a lot less to jiggle for a male character, but hey, that could work. I mean, I guess. I mean, not sure what would be jiggling. I guess if a fat character can jiggle, and not sure. Those down there, the sexual organs down there for men, don't really jiggle so much. But a fat character could jiggle technically. But yeah, jiggle physics is a way to introduce a ecchi element into a game, and it's usually not very problematic in it per se. It doesn't take you out of the gameplay sort of thing, and sometimes it's actually quite natural movement sort of thing, based on the attire the characters have, and, to be fair, breasts, they're going to jiggle. They do. It's just a fact of life. You can't have them just completely still, it's natural if they jiggle. Sure, sometimes it can be ridiculous and it becomes kind of hilarious if they just jiggle too much. Again, Dead or Alive, if you set the maxing to like 99 years old or max jiggle settings, that gets pretty ridiculous. It becomes less sexy then and more funny, but I think that's kind of positive if you have the options of that. If it can become hilarious, nothing wrong with that. But I do think the jiggle physics is a good way at least for the female characters, to present a ecchi element, which doesn't really get in the way. Maybe if it was panning specifically onto the breasts sort of during the sort of moment sort of thing, taking away from the gameplay just to focus on the jiggle, maybe that would become problematic. But in terms of it alone, I think it's a good way and both in terms of being able to present a more realistic sense of movement and flow, because it does look odd if it's just completely still. And speaking of Dead or Alive, following up on that, Dead or Alive 5 last round honestly had one of my... Dead or Alive 5 had one of my favourite in terms of the heroic mechanics, and it was kind of followed up on via Project Zero, because it used the soft engine, and that is the sweat mechanic. It made perfect sense for a fighter in Dead or Alive that as they fight, they sweat, and the clothes start to become a bit more transparent. And this became true not just for the female characters, but also the male characters. Not really as emphasised with the male characters, unfortunately, which is a shame, because, shirtless, sweaty male character, I imagine a lot of them would look pretty good and would be quite attractive to a lot of audience members. But in terms of the female characters, the sweat mechanics worked quite a bit, and it was actually a pretty good showcase. Again, like the armor break thing, as an example, it kind of showed you the trials and tribulations you've gone through the battle. You see that your character has worked up a sweat in this fight, and then there's a brief ecchi element to it. Again, the way that it's kind of best done is that it doesn't take you away out of the sort of battle itself, because it's not, it's not pausing you to show. But in between rounds, as you do the victory sort of thing, in a fighting game like Dead or Alive, that's a brief moment to pan the camera around. If you really are interested in having a bit of a heroic element to it, you can pan the around character of your sweaty victored fighter, or your sweaty loser, as it were. But it's a really nice subtle way to have an ecchi element, which isn't too in your face. It makes a lot of sense. And again, Project Zero followed that well with the water mechanic in Project Zero. The water mechanic played a role in terms of how more likely you would be to attack by ghosts. You would take more damage and have the potential risk of being poisoned. And it kind of showed the threat. And so rain became a dangerous, hazardous element. And it could show how wet your character was based off the state of their clothes. And there was even a meter if you needed to. But you could often tell based off the state of their clothes, the hair, and the transparency of their said clothes. It's a good way of showing gameplay elements visually. Without it being too obscuring or without being too distracting. Again, you could have a brief second when you decide to linger, pause, have your camera pan sort of thing. But it was never an issue where it sort of interrupted the gameplay or paused it in a way. There are also games which will have the ecchi elements, via sort of cutscenes, some sort of rub mechanics or thing, or some sort of ecchi element or thing. And these can be, I guess, fun distractions. Sometimes it can take you out of the moment. Sometimes it's a bit, why? Feels a bit uncomfortable if you focus it on that much, but really it's not too much different from Pokemon and Me in a lot of those cases. And if you've been on the internet, you've seen what they consider about Gardevoir. So you can't even say that Pokemon and Me cannot be misconstrued as sort of ecchi heroic element. But yeah, in that case, it's a little bit odd, but so long as it fits in with the rest of the game, not too much of a problem. Let's see, something else about that. Well, okay, let's see here. The more equally distributed the fan service is, particularly in costumes, the better. Again, the best example of erotic elements being applied to a game is Soul Calibur. It kind of combines just about all the good mechanics. You've got male characters and female characters who have lots of erotic elements. I mean, Voldo exists. And Mitsurugi has never known what a shirt is. Keelik is often, and Maxie are often bare-chested sort of thing. A lot of the characters as well are quite attractive, and there's actually a decent diversity amongst the characters. That's also kind of a problem Senran Kagura has. A lot of the characters kind of fit within the same mold. They're all generally the large-chested characters, almost absurdly large-chested, and it's doesn't really appeal to a wide enough range as a result. And again, they're all female, whereas Soul Calibur has a diversity within its gender. There's both male and female characters, and ecchi elements can be applied to both. And customization can also enhance a lot of heroic appeal, or be a way to add a ecchi element without taking away from the main game itself. At that point, with the customization, it becomes your choice. Let's say Fire Emblem Three Houses recently introduced maid outfits or thing. And you don't need the ecchi elements as you play through the main game, but if you wanted to dress up your character as a maid, you can. It is entirely your choice to be able to apply an ecchi element. So you can play the game without the ecchi element or with the ecchi element, and choice is always a good thing, is it not? And so on that quick comment about customization, unless an element of customization, the sex appeal factor should probably suit the character in question, or, in the opposite case, should be a stark contrast for the character. Either as a joke or for a story reason. These can still be played well, and I guess I also sort of personally like that because it gets the blush sort of aspect that is a personal interest of mine. I like characters who and sort of embarrassed characters and such. It's cute. Which is funny given we're talking about an ecchi element, so it should really be more sexy than cute, but blushing characters are cute. They're adorable. I don't think the middle ground works well. Either you're designing the costume of the character to either fit the character, or you're doing it as a bit of a contrast sort of case, where, it's not thing for the character at all, but there's a reason for it, or it ends up playing off through a joke or a story element. And again, you shouldn't really try to go for the middle ground. And in terms of designs, there was actually a funny little one I saw about Akira Toriyama, wherein Akira Toriyama was asked to, of course, design the characters in the latest Dragon Quest game, Dragon Quest XI, and for the priestess character, he was asked to give her a miniskirt, but after hearing about having the character described to him, he actually ended up drawing her in a typical villain maiden outfit and didn't go with a miniskirt at all, which I found, it makes sense. The costume was designed to fit the character's personality. So the miniskirt would not have fit, unless the miniskirt sort of thing was going to become a certain joke or scene within the game itself. There was no reason to give her that, and it would be an ecchi element that felt pointless. It would be an ecchi element that was purely there for the ecchi element rather than serving as any additional purpose. Which is kind of weird to say that, applying erotic elements and fan service is there to apply more than just being in of itself. But it can contribute to the experience. Dead or Alive, for instance, with the latest entry, has felt like it's lacked a little bit of a spark because it's not embracing its character enough. It's always known as the jiggle physics fighter, but that gave itself quite a bit of charm and personality to it. Samurai Kagura series is so over top of the ecchi elements that it's actually charming. Whilst I have said it fails a lot of heroic application of elements, at the same time, its absurd abundance of heroic elements is what gives it its charm. It gives it a lot of personality and character. And that goes along with its decent gameplay. Sometimes you can't just rely upon just the gameplay. Sometimes you have to have a characteristic to them. And sometimes that characteristic or personality or story, as it were, happens to be of an heroic nature. It happens, you know? But, so long as it doesn't take away from the gameplay, that ultimately helps serve to better the gameplay by giving it more of a character. Giving it something to identify it for. And I guess ultimately the big thing to take away from this is non-interruptive ecchi is best ecchi. If the ecchi pauses the gameplay, or if the ecchi interferes with the gameplay by say doing that sort of butt pan camera angle whilst you're in the middle of a fight, that is problematic. However, if it's just like in a cutscene, a not too serious cutscene, or playful one, or if it's just during the middle of a camera pan sort of thing, that's totally fine. So long as the ecchi doesn't. So ecchi is good so long as it doesn't get in the way of gameplay, and preferably if it doesn't get in the way of tone, unless said ecchi is optional. Again, a lot of horror games have heroic outfits as a bonus thing, which, to be fair, ties in well. There's always been a bit of eroticism with the horror genre, so it makes sense. But those are often optional costumes you get after you complete the game, which I think makes sense and works well. That choice, the ecchi aspects, becomes optional. It's your choice. I'm doing a lot of hand movements here, and you can't see them, so I'm not sure why. In any case, time to try out mango tea. Mango. That's actually quite bitter. I get a bit of the mango. It's very subtle. It's flowing on the bottom of my tongue. That's weird. It's more like a black tea, if anything. Oh, there's a bit more of the mango. The flavour is mostly to the bottom, but yeah, it's actually quite. It's like a far more pleasant English breakfast in terms of black tea. English breakfast is really good once you add milk, but English breakfast is one of the weakest teas when it's pure black, in my opinion. I mean, if you're going that way, there are so many other better black teas to have without milk, but it's like English breakfast is designed solely for milk. But it's actually quite nice black tea. With the mango, a lot more subtle. There's a bit of it, bit on the lip, and then it kind of just travels underneath to the tongue. Sorry, of course, all of its flavours on the tongue, but like at the bottom of the tongue, underneath my tongue. Usually, flavour kind of travels down it, but not underneath it. It's bitter without too much of an edge to it. You're not suddenly going to jump out your seat from it. So it's kind of a bit more inviting. Again, maybe it's a pure black tea, effectively, that's well suited for kids. It's a nice introductory bitter taste. I feel like I didn't mention that about another tea as well. In any case, that was the mango tea. And I hope you've all enjoyed this discussion, inspired by a comment made by Stop Skeleton from Fighting video, which, funny enough, given his more critical approach to ecchi elements, it's probably the case that I don't think he was supposed to inspire someone to talk about it in such a positive manner. I will say that in regards to ecchi elements, for all the sort of with all the moments I've said that are problematic when you try to introduce ecchi elements, I am quite against censorship. So whilst the Fire Emblem face-touching thing, for instance, in Fire Emblem Fates, was odd and didn't quite fit, I personally don't think it should have been removed. That was kind of a developer choice to include it in the first place, and I don't like each region having tons of differences. That's more of a subject for another time, so that is definitely a future tea time I will have to get onto. But yeah, in terms of the ecchi elements, try not to be interruptive, try to be fitting to the game, or at least if it's not fitting, try to have it as a purely optional feature that if you don't think it's fitting, you can avoid, but if you're looking for that sort of thing, you can totally go for it. And there are certain bare ways to do ecchi. Really, people, look to Soul Calibur. It's the best example. It's equal across the plane, lots of customization, all the characters are wonderfully handsome. And it has Voldo. That's what the world needs. More Voldos. More Voldos. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tea time, and cheerio!